What's up, guys, and welcome to Gamescript. And if you've been watching my shows for the past few weeks, you've made a lot of money off of Joe Flacco. But what's he going to do for us tonight? I'll get into it after this. There is a ton of value in current underdog playoff best ball ADP. Elite offenses like the Bills are easy to stack. Take advantage of uncertainty and start drafting now. Use the promo code SEEK for up to $100 match on your first deposit. And subscribe to Heat Seeker Sports on YouTube for underdog strategy and drafting shows. What's up, guys, and welcome to Gamescript. I'm Simon Edwards, aka Pumacom with Heat Seeker Sports, and this show is going to focus on the New York Jets versus the Cleveland Browns. We're looking at a 36.5 point total with the Jets as 7-point favorite or 7-point dogs. And if you've been watching my shows for the past few weeks, I've been on Joe Flacco basically since he broke out, and it's been good for us on our cheap stack shows. And tonight he runs into a little bit of a roadblock with a good Cleveland defense, good Jets defense, obviously. And it's also a revenge game for him. So I'm not sure which direction we're going to go. We'll take a look when we get to that player pool. But before I get into that, make sure to hit the like button on this video. Looking for 15 likes to put out a shorter video a little bit later on. And subscribe to the YouTube page. I'm at 268 subscribers, looking for 300 by the end of the season. So we've only got about 32 to go. So keep hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already. And on top of that, I am running a promotion with Underdog. If you make a deposit on Underdog using the promo code SEEK, S-E-E-K, like Heat Seekers, then they're going to match you up to $100 on your first deposit when you open an account. And it's a really good deal because it's hard to get free money from DFS sites these days. And $100 will get you about 20 entries into the Mitten, one of their playoff best ball contests, and 4 entries into the $25 Gauntlet. And that's another playoff best ball contest. And I'm doing a ton of playoff best ball content and put up a bunch of shows already. You can check them out on the YouTube page. You want to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you get alerts for when these shows come out. I'm going to be doing a few of them a week, and was joined by Spread a Stare this week. And he came on as a betting expert and gave a lot of good insight into teams' scenarios for advancing to the playoffs and how they might do in the playoffs to help us take advantage of a lot of ADP value currently happening with all the uncertainty in playoff best ball. So moving on to the game script. We got the Jets versus Cleveland, and this should be a good game because it's a revenge game for Flacco, and Flacco's been on fire lately, but also because the Browns are playing for clinching their playoff spot tonight. If they win this game, then they clinch a playoff spot. They're basically at 99%, so even if they lose, they still have a chance to clinch it this week, if not next. And it is a low scoring game. We got a 36.5 point total. 2 good defenses facing off against each other. The Jets have a pretty bad offense, and they are on a backup quarterback, as well as the Browns. We're dealing with another game with backup quarterbacks, and it's Thursday night football. So lots of rest issues there with teams not being able to to rest in time for these games, and the game plans tend to be very vanilla. So I think this is going to be a defensive heavy game, and it is going to probably be the end of the run for our friend Joe Flacco here. Flacco, as you can see, we started recommending him at the Jacksonville game. I think that was the first game as an actual starter. Saw that he had done pretty well against the Rams, and from that point on, I was on top of him because versus Jacksonville, he faced a bad defense. Versus Chicago, he faced a mediocre defense, and then versus Houston, he faced a good matchup against the Houston defense. So been on him for about 3 weeks in a row, and he's paid off every time for a cheap stack option. But tonight we're seeing his price tag is way high at 10.6, and he's in a bad matchup for pretty much the first time. And I am going to be not using Joe Flacco tonight because Joe Flacco, as good as he's been to us lately, tonight is the night where he's going to kind of end that run, I think. Facing off against the Jets defense, it's a revenge game for him, but it's versus a Jets defense who's really good and they're familiar with him and his weaknesses. So I am not going to be betting on Joe Flacco tonight, but I do think that the Cleveland Browns are most likely to win this matchup, although I do think that they're due for a letdown spot. And I would not be surprised if the Jets, the way that they've been upsetting teams this season, throughout the season, I would not be surprised if we see another upset tonight with the Jets, and we'll get into that with the alternative build. But Amari Cooper had a monster game this past week, 54.5 points, 23 points the week before that, 24 points, 14 the week before that. So since Joe Flacco's been on board, Amari Cooper has come out of his shell. 14 targets against Jacksonville, 8 versus Chicago, and 15 versus Houston. So he's been getting a ton of work. Joe Flacco's favorite receiver. Joe Flacco's other favorite receiver is David Njoku. David Njoku has been on fire as well. 9 targets last week, 14 the week before that, 8 the week before that. Njoku's another guy I've been recommending along with Joe Flacco because those two have a really good connection. He got 27 points, 29 points, and 16 points. David Njoku is a good play tonight because the defense of the Jets is not very elite, I'd say, versus the tight ends. So, Jets are giving up, they're giving up only 8.5 DraftKings points a game versus tight ends, but tight ends is probably the position that they're weakest against apart from the running back position. The running backs are getting 25.5 DraftKings points a game from the Jets. Other positions, the Jets are only giving up 12 points a game to quarterbacks. They're only giving up 7.6 points a game to wideouts, and they're only giving up 13.5 DraftKings points a game to slot receivers. So interesting matchup for David Njoku. Njoku's been on fire lately, as I covered, and he's probably going to get a lot of targets. According to Rich Rebar at Sharp Football Analysis, tight ends have gotten 23.75% of the targets against the Jets, which is the 7th highest in the league. And basically, they've allowed 16 touchdown passes through the air, and 8 of those have gone to tight ends. So the best matchup as far as a receiver in this game is going to be David Njoku. So keep him on your in your player pool for sure. And he might even be a captain option in a game, which should be a low-scoring game. And he has probably the highest upside out of the receiving core in this game. So if we move on to Breece Hall, Breece Hall is another good captain option. He's gotten a ton of targets under Trevor Siemian. Last week, he had 20 rushing attempts, and he got 16 targets versus the Commanders last week. And Cleveland this season, let's see what they're doing as far as what they're giving up. They're giving up only 20.7 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. So not a great matchup, but it's a middling matchup. They're giving up 19.5 DraftKings points a game to slot receivers. That's probably one of the better matchups. And otherwise, they're only giving up 13.7 DraftKings points a game to the quarterbacks, 9.9 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, and 7.8 DraftKings points a game 7.8. Yeah, that's pretty much the same as what the Jets are giving up. So that's a very, very similar matchup there for the tight ends. Although David Njoku, with all that, like a percentage of targets going to tight ends and the percentage of touchdowns going to tight ends, I definitely would take Njoku over Conklin. If you look at Conklin, he has not done much at all. He's had his moments, but 7 targets, 6 targets, 9 targets, 5 targets, but he hasn't put up more than 10 DraftKings points in that stretch. He has shown some signs of upside earlier in the season against Vegas Raiders. He had 14 DraftKings points. He had 13 versus the Chargers. He's had a couple other weeks where he had some double-digit points. But in this matchup, I probably don't like him so much compared to David Njoku, especially if I'm going with one of those tight ends. Zach Wilson is out this week. Garrett Wilson has been a favorite target of Simeon. He got 15 targets last week, 4 the week before that, 14 the week before that. So he's been on a little bit of a target tear lately. 16 DraftKings points last week. A few weeks ago, he had 23 versus Houston. And, he's been up and down this season based on the quarterback play. I don't like him that much with Trevor Siemian as the quarterback tonight, though. But Garrett Wilson is a guy that gets volume, and you don't want to take volume guys out of your player pool no matter what the matchup is. Breece Hall, talked about him. We got Trevor Siemian. You've seen 12 DraftKings points last week in a game where the team scored 30 points against Washington. Like, you got 12 DraftKings points against Washington. That is not a good sign. And Trevor Siemian is probably, in this matchup against Cleveland, a guy that we don't want heavy exposure to, even though he will have volume as a passer. But I still do not like Trevor Siemian tonight, even though he's at 8,800, which is, as we've seen recently on Showdown slates, that's pretty cheap for a quarterback. But unless you're building Jets win scripts, I would probably stay away from Siemian, because I want as little Jets exposure as possible for the most part in the lineups that I build tonight, based on how I think the game will most likely play out. But there will be opportunity for us to build in those Jets win scripts that we'll have a chance to build for that upset that I definitely think is in play tonight. Although I think the most likely outcome is Cleveland comes away with a win. Jets upset is definitely in play. We got Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford has not done much of anything, but they're down so much of their tackles on the offensive line that it's really going to be difficult for him to do anything. That's why they've been so pass heavy recently with Flacco. 15 rush attempts last week, 8 the week before that, 12 the week before that. As far as targets, 2, 5, and 6, but he has max put up 13 DraftKings points in that stretch. As far as, let's see, Kareem Hunt has 7 attempts, 10 attempts, 12 attempts, 4 targets, and then 1 target in those other 3 weeks, but has not been able to put up more than 10 DraftKings points. But given the game script with the Browns as 7-point favorites, like that would indicate maybe we get a little bit more usage from these running backs, and they are in that good matchup against the Jets. So in my Browns win scripts, I'll probably have at least one running back in each of those lineups, given the matchup, and given I think Flacco is going to struggle against his old team, and they're going to have to rely more on the run game and defense and kickers tonight for the Browns. Elijah Moore has not been very impressive since he joined the Browns, but he is in a revenge game against his old team. He's had a few weeks where he scored double-digit points. I would not be surprised if he ends up being a guy that they target tonight, just based on his history with the Jets. But that's kind of a crapshoot. But the Jets, as I said, they're only giving up 13 DraftKings points to the slot, so he's not the best matchup other than Narrative Street there. Let's see. Deshaun Watson is out, obviously. We go past this stretch of quarterbacks. We get to the Browns D. Browns D is at 5,600 tonight. That's a pretty good, expensive price for the Browns, but I don't hate it based on the matchup. And they're at home trying to clinch the playoff spot. This could easily go in favor of the Browns D. 13 DraftKings points against Chicago, 12 versus Jacksonville. They've had some pretty big games. They kind of took things on their shoulders once Deshaun Watson ended up getting hurt, and they've done a good job holding up the team and keeping teams to low-scoring games when they need to, but they have had a lot of games where they've allowed a whole bunch of points. If you look at some of the scores against this Browns D, 22 points against them by Houston, 17 against them by Chicago. Jacksonville scored 27. Rams scored 36. Denver scored 29. Baltimore scored 31. Seattle scored 24. Indy scored 38. And Baltimore, again, scored 28. And then Pittsburgh scored 26. So there's some big scoring weeks against the Browns, even though they're a good defense. And that is our little window into a potential upset by the Jets. Kareem Hunt, talked about him, talked about Conklin. Kickers I like. Make sure you don't have Hopkins in your player pool tonight. He is out. Patterson is filling in. He's the former Detroit kicker. I mean, there was nothing really wrong with Patterson. He missed a couple field goals, but then he missed extra points in 2 weeks in a row, and that's what kind of cost him his job in Detroit. And he finds himself a home on the Browns, another playoff contender. So Patterson is in play tonight. Greg Zuerlein also in play tonight. Zuerlein is, pretty much in most of these scripts where the Jets win, he's found his way in most of those scripts. They won last week against Washington. He had 14 DraftKings points. They beat Houston. He had 17 DraftKings points when they lost to Vegas by 4 points. He's had 16 DraftKings points. When they beat Philly, he had 14. When they beat Denver, he had 18. And when they beat Buffalo, he had 11. So keep that in mind with Zuerlein. Zuerlein, if you have a win script for the Jets, he will probably play a role in a win by the Jets. And I believe the Jets defense would also play a role in a win. They have not had a ton of double-digit points weeks, but they've had a 12-point week against Houston, a 13-point week against Miami. That's pretty significant against a high-powered offense. 11-point week against Philly, another high-powered offense. 18 against Denver, and 20 against Buffalo, another high-powered offense. So the Jets defense shows up in these matchups, which is another reason why you don't want to rule out a Jets upset this week. Don't forget that Joe Flacco was on his couch up until a few weeks ago, and he's a backup quarterback. As much as he's done well for us, like tonight is a week to not rely heavily on Joe Flacco, I believe. Xavier Gibson has been getting a decent amount of work lately. 2 targets last week, 6 the week before that, 1 the week before that, 6 the week before that. He's a young guy on the team. He played a big part of that win against Buffalo with a return touchdown, and ever since that, I think he had a return touchdown in that game. Ever since that week, he has been well liked by the team, and he's been given his opportunities most recently. So Xavier Gibson, he's a guy that could potentially have a decent game this week. Let's see what the Browns are giving up to his position. Gibson is the slot receiver, and the Browns are giving up that 19.5 DraftKings points a game to the slot. As far as Garrett Wilson, he's running 30% of his routes from the slot. So Garrett Wilson has that equally good slot matchup there against that Cleveland D. So also opens the door for our Jets upset. And the more I'm talking about it, the more I'm leaning more towards the Jets upset. I just think that this defense on the Browns side is too good. Cedric Tillman is a young receiver. He had a lot of hype going into the preseason, and they gave up Donovan Peoples-Jones because they knew that Cedric Tillman was going to take his spot. Had 8 targets a couple weeks ago against Chicago, 4 the week before that against Jacksonville. Basically, since their bye week, he's been getting a lot of work. Since week 9. Since week 9, he's been getting a lot of work, and he hasn't produced yet, but he's going to have a breakout game probably by the end of the season, especially with Joe Flacco as his quarterback. I don't know if this is the matchup for that tonight, but he's only 3K. So if you need a 3K guy to rotate in, Cedric Tillman is a guy you should have on your list. Jason Brownlee has 3 targets last week. Hasn't really done much beyond that. $200 salary last week if you used him in showdown contests, but Brownlee has a $2,800 salary. I don't like that salary. I'd take Gibson at $3,200. But maybe if you build a couple Gibson lineups, maybe just swap in Brownlee without changing anything else in the lineup in case Brownlee's the guy that ends up getting the targets tonight. Allen Lazard is dirt cheap at $2,400, but he is dirt cheap for a reason. You see his targets 16011 and his fantasy output 05000. He's just been a complete bust. A guy they brought in for Rodgers to have a target he was comfortable with, and then Rodgers goes out week 1, and Allen Lazard has been MIA ever since that moment. And let's see, we go. This running back is the backup basically to Breece Hall, and he's gotten some decent work lately. 9 last week, 4 the week before that, 3 the week before that for runs. Abanaconda is his name. 0 targets last week, 2 targets the week before that, and 2 targets in week 11. Has not really done much with those targets though, but he's probably not a guy I'm so much interested in tonight. Given the matchup, I would much prefer to play Breece Hall if I'm going to go with any running backs on the Jets. I don't think we need to go here. And plus, he's questionable anyways. Dalvin Cook is a backup on the Jets. He hasn't done anything this year either. Another one of these veterans that they brought in, and he's been a bust. His career was looking over in Minnesota, and he's proved it in the Jets. He hasn't had a single double-digit point week. But at 2K, like in a game where the Jets are going to try to take advantage of the running game, they don't want they don't want Simeon making mistakes against that Cleveland defense. So the run game they will be relying heavily on tonight, I would imagine. And Cook, might play a role in that. Pierre Strong is Cleveland's backup running back beyond Kareem Hunt. And he's been getting a decent amount of attempts lately, but he hasn't done anything much. And he just doesn't get enough volume for a game like this. David Bell, another slot receiver on Cleveland. He had one 11-point week a couple weeks ago, but he hasn't really done too much. He was a hyped guy a couple years ago, and he did not do anything last year, and he hasn't done anything this year either. But, he'd probably get a couple targets, and it depends on what you think he can do with those targets. I'll probably not really go there, but he's 1,600. Harrison Bryant, another tight end on the Browns. He had 5 targets a few weeks back against the Rams. That was Flacco's first game, and he ended up scoring 16 DraftKings points, but he hasn't really done anything since Flacco started locking in on David Njoku. But if the defense decides to focus maybe a little bit on Njoku, maybe they use a little bit more Bryant. Not sure how many 2 tight end sets that they run, but I would imagine it's a decent amount since they are lacking on that that offensive line with the tackles. Randall Cobb, $1,000 for Randall Cobb, but he hasn't done anything worth even justifying that salary. He had 8 DraftKings points a couple weeks ago. That's about it. Let's see, Jordan Akins. Don't really see too much else as far as dumpster diving. I think we can get into the build here. And I think if we're going to do a Jets upset build, I think our best option would probably be Breece Hall. Just based on these matchups here, with the Browns giving up 20.7 DraftKings points to the running back and 19.5 to the slot receivers, I think Breece Hall might be our guy for the captain. He will probably be popular tonight, which I don't like. When I'm trying to go for a lower owned situation. Let me check and see what the ownership is here. Yeah, the 4-2 Cleveland builds are going to be extremely popular, about 40%. So you can get different easily by taking the Jets upset build. Breece Hall is going to be about 15% owned in the captain, which is the highest owned guy on the slate. So, Breece Hall, along with 3 other Jets, though, will get you different because that's only going to be owned by about 13%. So that's a pretty good discount on ownership there. Let's check out and see what the optimizer is telling us for tonight's game. Get an idea of where they're trying to push us, and I'll build that one first, and then go into the underdog wins. Underdog wins have been huge for us lately too, by the way. Like, we've done a ton of those builds that have been successful by myself and with spread. And the optimizer also likes Breece Hall as a captain, and they like the Jets D. So let's start building this with the optimal lineup. They like Jets D, 4K. I like that discount on the Jets D. That's a good price for them. Let's see who else they have. They got Riley Patterson and the Browns D, double defense, which I can see tonight. I don't hate double defense tonight, even though it would probably be higher owned than it should be. But the scoring game, you want volume and you want defense and kickers. Jerome Ford, they got him in there. I don't, he's got the matchup, but that's about like all I can say about the guy. And then you can use your imagination for the last spot. You pretty much have everyone except for Cooper on the table there. So interesting way to go there. They end up with a 4-2 Cleveland build. So that's going to be a popular way to go tonight. But let's clear that out. Let's put Breece in that captain spot. Let's say that Wilson's going to get volume tonight. He's pretty cheap for 9,800. Not going to put a quarterback with him, though. I would rather go on the other side to David Njoku. We know he has a good matchup. Let's look at defenses at this point. Jets D is going to need to play a role. And we know that Zerline is going to need to play a role. So that's 4. Gives us 4 Jets. We are left with 7,300. We could use Elijah Moore in a revenge game. We could go with Browns D and leave a little bit of salary on the table to help us get even more different with that Breece Hall build. We can go with Kareem Hunt, knowing that the matchup is pretty good for running backs, and we can't afford Jerome Ford, but they're not really much difference between them. We could go Conklin. Conklin has a decent matchup. We'd be 5-1 at that point. Not sure I like that direction, but it's a direction. And we could go kicker for Cleveland. So there's a lot of ways that we can go there that work with a low scoring script. We don't have any quarterbacks in this lineup, which I like, because I don't like quarterbacks in these low scoring games or projected low scoring games, and I don't like quarterbacks versus the defenses either. So I don't like it against the Cleveland defense. I don't like it against the Jets defense. As I was saying, 13.7 DraftKings points is what Cleveland's giving up, and 12.1 is what the Jets are giving up to the quarterback position. So this is I kind of like this build. I like this direction. We got our Jets covered. We got Zerline covered. We've seen that he scored double-digit points in all those games. Maybe we want to get a little bit different. Maybe we want to put Zerline in that captain spot. Let's try Zerline in there as the captain. We've seen it happen before. Let's get Breece Hall back in there. And then let's go, at that point, we can put Simeon in if we want to. We can put Ford in if we want to, knowing that running back matchup. It would make sense to have Ford in this build because, he has a middling matchup. Let's say he scores like 12 DraftKings points. That's enough to get in an optimal tonight. Not enough to get in the captain, though. Zerline, if he scores 3 field goals, maybe 40-yarders, then he would make a lot of sense in the captain. Garrett Wilson is racking up the points in PPR. David Njoku is racking up some points, maybe scores a touchdown. Jets defense, they score double-digit points in this one. Breece Hall has a good amount of targets in this one, but not enough to get him past Zerline. But I can see this build coming into play if you wanted to go with a kicker. I think maybe we want a little bit more upside if we're going to use a kicker captain. We'd have to go down a little bit to get to Cooper on a guy. So if we're looking at a guy to swap out, Garrett Wilson. I mean, you can swap out Garrett Wilson for Flacco. I mean, for Cooper. And then just kind of scroll down to the 9K range, and you'll see like Simeon you could put in there. Still have a 4-2 Jets build. Ford you could get in there, maybe do a 3-3. I mean, that should still be pretty low owned, and then more and guys like that. So, your preference on the actual players here. But as far as Gamescript goes, I do think that this is a letdown spot for the Browns. It could easily go in the other direction, where they end up blowing out the Jets, or just winning a tight one against the Jets, or a low-scoring game against the Jets. They could hold the Jets to no points tonight. That could be an option. Let's try that. Let's go with Njoku in the captain. Let's go with Breece Hall. Maybe he's the only guy that we have on the Browns tonight. Let's go with Cooper. Looking for volume. Let's go with Patterson. Let's go with the Browns D. This is with 5,700. We can put in Hunt in that situation. We could put in, maybe Conklin if you wanted another Jet. If we play this like we played it with the game versus the Dolphins a couple weeks ago, where Tua had plenty of offensive weapons, but going against that Jets D, it didn't make sense to put Tua in that lineup, but it made sense to have guys like Tyreek and the Miami defense and guys like that. I ended up going 4-2 in that build. I talked at the beginning of that video how I wanted to go. I didn't like any Jets except for the defense, and I ended up putting Garrett Wilson in that lineup. If I had swapped him out to Jalen Waddle, it would have been a 5-1 build with the Jets defense as the only Jet in there. So maybe we have a similar situation tonight. Papa. Let's get the Jets defense in there. What's up, buddy?
Can I tell you something?
Yeah. Leaves us with 12-7.
When are we going to go to Rainforest Cafe?
In a little bit, bud. Here, you go downstairs. I'll be down in a bit, okay? Love you, bud. All right, that leaves us with 12-7. And you could put Breece Hall in there. You could put Joe Flacco in there. If you wanted to go with that 5-1 build, I think Flacco makes a lot of sense. Breece Hall makes a lot of sense in this build. Maybe it's just Hall and the Jets D. Breece Hall gets enough volume and targets to make sense, but that the Browns D is going to be focused on him. So maybe not such a great play. You could put Ford in this build and leave some money on the table. Lots of ways you can go with a 5-1 build if you put Njoku in the captain. Maybe you want to go just Breece Hall on the Jets and have him the captain. That makes a lot of sense for going with let's put Ford in there. We can go 5-1 with Breece Hall and the captain. At that point, we put in maybe Tillman. Maybe Tillman has a decent week. Or maybe we get rid of Cooper. Maybe we put in Njoku, because we know that Njoku's got that good matchup. That leaves us with 6,900. Nice. We got Moore here, Elijah Moore in his revenge game. We got Kareem Hunt we could put in there, Hopkins. So some options there. We'd leave money on the table there. So there's some directions for, like how one of these low-scoring games might play out. I could see an upset happening for sure with the Jets side, or I could see like a 5-1 Browns build where the Jets are just so inept in their offense with Simeon that, they can't put up any points, and the defense, just doesn't get any of the breaks that we need for them to come through. So keep that in mind when you're building and using your strategy. Look at the matchups in a night like tonight. Look at the volume. Volume is going to be huge, and just build from there. And make sure that you hit like on this video. If I get 15 likes, I'll put out a shorter video later on with more complete thoughts when we get closer to lock and have more information. Keep in mind, Amari Cooper is questionable. He did not practice. It's likely rest, but just keep that in mind. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm 30 subscribers off of 300, which is my goal for the end of the season. Regular season, playoffs, we're going to hit it hard for 400. And then make sure to sign up for an underdog account. Use the promo code SEEK, SEEK. I'm also going to be giving out my rankings for best ball, playoff best ball. If you sign up for the underdog account, use the promo code SEEK. Just let me know that you used that promo code. And when you enter the promo code, underdog is going to default to a promo code. You got to get rid of that and put in SEEK, SEEK. That'll give me the credit. And that way I'll be able to tell that you signed up. And then just send me a message after that, and I'll be able to hook you up with my rankings. And that's it for this week. And I'll see you guys later on tonight, probably.